In the studio right now, we've got a great guest. His name is Robert Delamar. He is the CEO of First Responders Technologies. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to bring you into the show because you guys are working on some interesting technologies to weed out the bad guys, essentially. Can you give us kind of a background of what the company is all about?
The company was founded by a former RCMP officer, and in his experience, there's something called the critical 10 to 15 seconds in the context of any event where somebody is potentially armed with a firearm. When you walk into that event, you don't have information, and it's that lack of information that makes situations so dangerous. Now, if you can extrapolate that to a broader example, say, for example, a mass shooting or a terrorist event, it's really chaotic for obvious reasons. And so to the degree or extent that you can use technology to provide information, timely information, to the person that's responsible for responding to that event, the opportunity there is there to save lives.
And so what is your technology based around and how does it work?
Yeah, so we are developing a Wi-Fi based detection system. Wi-Fi is really interesting. In the electromagnetic spectrum, there's high resolution, but high radiation, kind of health and safety risk type detection technologies. So an example is the L3 machine where you go in the box and they spin it around, right? You get a burst of radiation. You don't know how much that is.
I don't even know what that thing is doing.
I know, precisely, right? Exactly. Most people feel the same way.
Can they see me naked? I don't know.
Right?
Yeah.
That's exactly. Well, in my case, gosh. Anyway, so the second part of that is they also have low resolution technologies. Radar is one everybody's familiar with, and you just get a little blip on a screen, right? Yeah. So Wi-Fi is in this sort of magic zone. We call it the habitable zone in the RF spectrum. It's similar to kind of how everybody wants to live in Italy because it's not too hot, not too cold.
Yeah.
So Wi-Fi allows for good enough detection of, in particular, dangerous metals. So long guns, in particular, that's a particular use case we're looking to protect against to start. But at the same time, it's low resolution enough that it reduces some of the concerns people have about security because you can't get a visualization, for example, from that.
How is what you're developing right now different than the others out there?
I think we ask the question differently. And if you ask a question the right way in the world of technology, you can get answers that become fairly obvious to people. It's the, oh, why didn't I think of that? I think Wi-Fi is a technology that enables us to do that. So the question we're asking is, how can you find bad people? Because the reality is, in a mass shooting event, for example, there may be many people at that event who come along later and have, or are on premises and are armed. Police officers carry guns. In the United States, for example, huge portions of the population have concealed carry permits. So we're not looking for guns. We're looking for bad people with guns. And it's the asking of that question, how do you identify and stop a mass shooter, that has led to the product stack that we are envisioning. And we think that product stack has a lot of advantages over what the competition is developing because we're looking at it from the perspective of really the internet, the way the internet should be, which is cheap, which is accessible, which is quickly deployed. And Wi-Fi allows you to do that. Everybody has a Wi-Fi antenna in their home, their access point, right? If you could deploy those on a massive basis, you get a massive network. If you have a massive network, you have the ability to get good enough detection, which will allow at a software level to provide information to people at the right time in the event of a mass shooting.
When I think of security, I use airports. That comes to mind. A lot of stadiums now have the long lines to go through the metal detector.
But you can think of how absurd that is.
It's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
Because first point is, do you think the bad guy's going to take the line?
Well, unless he's really stupid.
Right.
Yeah.
Precisely. And so the way that we're envisioning, again, the product stack is that we're doing something called perimeter security. Think about Wi-Fi antennas arrayed, say, for example, on the sidewalk or in the parking lots before you get to the entrance of
so people won't be queued through lines.
Correct.
Yeah.
This will just be random. Obviously, placed from a perspective that's meshed in a normal network array. But from the perspective of the mass shooter, it should be ubiquitous and therefore hard to guess where the location is. And when there's some kind of obfuscation or a layer that is difficult to discover, that's when you've got an opportunity to leg up on the bad guy.
How are you going to determine what are the bad guys and what are the good guys, like the police with the guns?
So that is the question for the company. It's a really hard technology problem to solve.
Yeah.
And without giving away any proprietary secrets, I would say that there's a mix of the metal detection layer, and then what we call progressive surveillance. So a layer where the good enough detection says, hey, somebody over there is a bad guy.
Yeah.
You need to do something about it. And then progressive surveillance and response. So cameras, and more importantly, information to a security guard, to a police officer, that they can say on their smartphone, oh, go look at that guy. Get them before they get to the entrance is the point.
Well, it's interesting. I've been reading a lot about Wi-Fi technology lately. I think scientists at MIT have figured out how to use Wi-Fi signals to even see people's heartbeat and detect their emotions and things like that.
Well, that was actually Rutgers that originally discovered that. So Rutgers University were the inventors of the technology, which we licensed on an exclusive basis to really kind of develop this company. And that's where this whole journey began. They realized that you could use little bits of information in the Wi-Fi spectrum and it was finely detailed enough that you could detect heart rate and respiration. And from there we went.
So you could detect if someone is feeling agitated.
Theoretically, you could detect a heartbeat. Now, not in the context of the product we're developing right now, but that's how detailed the spectrum can provide. The detailed information the spectrum can provide.
Can we talk about the privacy issues? Because I know people listening right now are thinking, "Oh my God, now Wi-Fi is spying on me."
Yeah, that's right. That's a reasonable conclusion. The good news is what Wi-Fi is really doing is taking little bits of information about people that are carrying long guns and providing it to police officers in our case. So very different idea. The reality is that the signal, like I said before, is sensitive enough. It's good enough, but it's not so high resolution that, for example, you have to worry about somebody getting personal information about you. Keep thinking about, hanging out in your living room in your underwear. It's not that.
it's not reading your bank card information.
Correct. That's right. Yeah. That's right. It's not that sensitive, thankfully. But it's sensitive enough. If you were carrying a firearm in your living room, absolutely, it would be able to tell you that there's a long gun in the living room. Boy, you should probably check that out.
I imagine with this type of technology, instead of having the long queues, going through metal detectors, this would kind of free things up in larger events and stadiums and subways.
Depending on the value of the target, unfortunately, and I hate using language like that, but you have to think the way the bad guys think. The more people that are congregated in one place, the higher the likelihood it is. And especially, it's not something we think about necessarily here in Canada, because with the exception of the Parliament Hill lone wolf case, most of the big terrorist attacks were interdicted by our security professionals. But in this particular case, the more valuable the target, the likelihood is that they're going to be progressively more invasive layers of security. So you absolutely probably do need to have a front entrance X-ray machine still. And why wouldn't you? If you think about this in the sense of like a medieval fortress, or if you go to the Citadel in Halifax, for example, right? They've got the high walls. Then behind the high walls is a place where guys can shoot at you. And then inside there's a second layer of defense where if, we lost the walls, we can go back in further into the fortress. Same idea here. And so especially at a sports stadium, for example, there's clearly going to be some kind of highly invasive radar type technology, whether it's millimeter wave or some otherwise, that will be deployed. But what about the parking lots? Why wouldn't you want to have more information before they get to the building? And that's where we come in. We call that the perimeter security.
Well, I look at the Manchester
perfect
terrorist
example.
attack there. Yeah. I mean, he didn't make his way into the stadium. Correct. He was on the outside.
Correct. Yeah, he did all the damage in the lobby there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the November 13 attacks in France were similar. The Stade de France attack, the idea there, they think, was that they were going to set off a suicide bomb outside. People would rush out, and then they would set off a second and a third. And what stopped one of the attacks was a smart security guard who said, this guy looks out of place.
Yeah.
So again, the interesting thing about the security paradigm is, and New York City probably said that does this best. It says, if you see something, say something. A human being is still going to be your best line of defense.
So, I mean, this isn't the end all be all of security. It's still going to
Absolutely
rely on a number of other
In fact,
factors.
we are a human-centric company. The idea is, again, from the founder of our company who lived as an RCMP officer, these kind of threats. The idea is that if you get better information to security professionals, that's just one step further toward being able to thwart a terrorist attack or a mass shooting, some bad guy who's intent on doing harm.
Robert, where can people find out more information about first responders?
They can check out our website, of course. It's www.firstrespondertech.com.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much.